Now, every so often when doing research for a video, I'll come across an old article that maybe made a bold prediction or that reported on a supposedly credible leak or rumor that didn't exactly turn out to be true. Sometimes there'll even be articles that I very much remember reading back in the day, which will add to the, well, humor or even frustration factor as I remember how maybe excited I was at the possibility that what I was reading would turn out to be true or come to pass. And never has stumbling on an old article made me more, shall we say, frustrated than this one did from back in 2014 that I stumbled upon the other day, because it is one that, yeah, I very much remember reading then, though it was hardly the only one like it or the only website reporting on this. This was a story that a lot of news outlets picked up on and ran with. And as you can see by the headline on your screen, if you're watching the video and not just listening, it was one of the many that claimed that with the sequels, Lucasfilm was about to redefine long-form storytelling. Furthermore, in this particular article, they talk about how the then upcoming sequel trilogy had already been planned out from start to finish, rather than having one filmmaker try to piece together a sequel based on the previous movie, and that all the tie-in material would help flesh out the story and legitimately be part of the world. And as we now know here well after the fact, and after hearing from some of those who made those films, some of the comments made by the actors, writers, and directors over the past few years, not to mention what we figured out from just watching the films themselves as they came out, there was no planned out storyline from start to finish. There may have initially been some sort of rough outline or some ideas for the trilogy and surrounding material, like the books and comics. I don't think they went into the whole thing completely blind or without giving one moment of thought to how the story might play out. But, love or hate it, The Last Jedi didn't seem to care about that plan, and Lucasfilm must have been okay with it not caring about that plan, because it's pretty much the perfect example of doing what you want with a movie with little care or regard given to what came before or after, with Rian Johnson himself even recently saying he really wanted to give his film a solid and definitive ending, despite there still being a movie to go in the trilogy, not to mention the whole Skywalker saga. Then there's, of course, its follow-up film, The Rise of Skywalker, the trilogy capper, and never before has a film felt more like trying to piece together something from the previous movies without there having been a plan in place than that one did. Somehow Palpatine returning is the ultimate example of having no flight plan, no runway in sight, and hoping to somehow stick the landing in dense fog regardless. Which is where it sometimes feels like the Lucasfilm story group exists, in a dense fog, because they seem to have a difficult time keeping everything around them in the canon straight, despite existing and getting paid to do that very thing. Either that or they simply have no real power to dictate or veto an idea from someone above them. Even if it contradicts the canon, they're again paid to keep straight. And they, the Lucasfilm story group, were brought up and talked about in many of these articles back then. They were going to be the key to all of this, the custodians of the canon who helped weave these massive and impressive narratives across multiple forms of media, and that would prevent the contradictions that often plagued the expanded universe that preceded it. In fact, that very thing was sort of boasted about in a video here on YouTube that came out on the same day it was announced back in 2014 that the expanded universe was being disbanded and rebranded Legends, a video that celebrated what the expanded universe had accomplished, which was nice, and promised that going forward, again thanks to this story group, they do even better with the new canon. And yeah, I know I'm not really saying anything I haven't said 100 times before at this point, nor am I trying to sound like a bitter, angry fan or to just hate on the sequels again to hate on the sequels. I know some won't believe this, but I'm actually long since over most of this, and when rereading this article, I actually more laughed and wistfully shook my head and thought, oh, what could have been? Just where would the franchise be right now if they had delivered on the sequels and created all this meaningful tie-in material around it and changed long-form storytelling forever? Certainly it or the fan base wouldn't be anywhere near as divided as it currently is if they'd pulled off something even remotely close to what was promised. Heck, even just 3 good solid movies with one unified vision and a plan behind them, and sure, maybe some decent side stories in books and comics that had at least loose connections, that would have prevented the shattering of the fan base. I don't think we all expected perfection and demanded nothing less than the most intricately crafted story of all time, as much as we just expected something really well planned out and that would be fun and interesting to watch unfold. we could maybe glean some extra insights from the books and comics about where the story might be headed, like they essentially said would be the case. I mean, let's not forget how much of the fan base was united after The Force Awakens, how positive most fans were, and how popular theory videos were because we all believed in the promise. We all believed there was a grand plan in place. We believed we could go figure out where the story was, for the most part, heading, if we just looked hard enough. The clues had to be right in front of us. They told us they would be. But then after The Last Jedi, the narrative completely changed and the fan base shattered. Suddenly we were told the real issue all along had been our expectations, not any sort of broken promise about how this would all make sense and come together. We were just mad that it hadn't gone exactly how we personally wanted it to, that our favorite theory hadn't panned out. It wasn't that it had all gone completely against anything the previous movie and books and comics had even remotely hinted at or anything, and that it had been done for the sake of subverting our expectations. It was that we were entitled fans who should just be happy to get Star Wars at all, which, yeah, is something I've literally been told many, many times, that I should just be grateful that we get Star Wars at all. As if it's not something we fans pay for via buying movie tickets, subscribing to Disney Plus, and buying merchandise of all kinds, from those supposed to be important and relevant books and comics, all the way down to action figures and coffee mugs. Never forget, we're paying for the Star Wars we consume. It's not falling from the heavens like some sort of free gift from the entertainment gods. And thus, as paying customers, we're not only allowed to criticize it, and shouldn't be criticized for criticizing it, but we should give them feedback, as they should want our feedback in order to keep their customer base as happy as possible. Which, no, doesn't mean we fans should be dictating everything. That's not only a flat-out bad idea for many, many reasons, but it's impossible considering there are millions of us with all slightly different takes and ideas and opinions. Only that they, Disney and Lucasfilm, not to mention some fans, should remember it's not our job as fans to like whatever Star Wars they give us. It's not our job to stay happy and positive no matter what, to just be thankful they're making money off of us by giving us more Star Wars that we get to pay for. If you truly want to be a good fan, then it's your job to be a discerning customer and give honest opinions instead of just holding to a narrative about Star Wars one way or the other, which unfortunately many of us do, even if we don't realize it. I mean, I understand the people who hate Disney for whatever reason and are done with Star Wars. I respect that you are 100% out and done at this point, and thanks for still watching my videos regardless. But if you are someone who does want it to get better someday, who would watch it if it does, if you have a speck of hope left in you at the very least for the franchise, you should stand up and praise the things you actually thought were good, not just stick to a narrative that it's all bad. That doesn't help anything. That's just going to confuse them about what's actually good or not, or what's welcome by most of the fans. As it also doesn't help anything if you stick to the narrative it's all good, mainly because you don't want to be seen as some kind of hater because you've done nothing but spend the last few years hating on the haters and talking about how they are everything wrong with the franchise. You don't want to be lumped in with them. But just saying something is good, that you loved it even though deep down maybe you didn't, or at the very least you had some sort of issue with it, it's going to have the same problem. Disney is going to double down on crap because it is getting praised by you instead of you again being a discerning customer. Anyway, my point is, and yes, I think I have one, that even if we don't always agree, even if we pretty much never agree, we should stop the constant bickering and present something resembling a unified front as a fandom. That it's not up to us to fix the fan base. That's not our job. It's up to Disney and Lucasfilm. It's their job to produce quality content that we're maybe, hopefully, much less likely to argue about in the first place, because it's simply quality, well thought out, and consistent Star Wars like they promised they were going to give us. Well, that's all I got for you this time. Not exactly sure where this video came from exactly. I think especially after this strange previous year where Kenobi nearly broke me as a fan, not because it was the worst thing I've ever seen, but simply because it wasn't anywhere near as good as it could have and should have been. And after Andor was this amazing piece of content out of nowhere, I just feel like I'm in this strange place with Disney and the franchise right now, and that sometimes it makes it tricky, I guess you could say, to make content when you both want to praise it and rip it to shreds at the same time. When you want to have all this hope, but you feel like you've been burned before, and also have been pleasantly surprised out of nowhere sometimes. I don't know, just, I guess, take to the comments below, and if you're still listening to me ramble at this point, tell me what you think or how you feel about the state of the franchise. And until next time, thanks for watching.